Why do the most ignorant people always speak with the absolute certainty? Why does someone who knows the least about a subject argue with the greatest amount of confidence? You have likely stood in front of this phenomenon, exhausted, confused, and silent. You argue with someone who has no expertise, no evidence, and no logical foundation. Yet they speak with a confidence you could only dream of. You ask yourself, how can someone so wrong be so sure of themselves? Most people today call this the Dunning-Kruger effect. The scientific idea that incompetence prevents people from recognizing their own incompetence. But 200 years before modern science proved it, the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer saw it clearly. He watched it happen in the universities of Germany, in the social circles of Berlin, and in the halls of power. He saw mediocre minds speak with absolute authority. He saw fools so confident in their ignorance that they dismissed genius. And he documented the exact psychological mechanism behind it. He did not just observe that idiots think they are smart. He explained why they are structurally incapable of thinking otherwise. For Schopenhauer, this certainty is not a choice. It is a form of blindness. In this video, we will explore the cold mechanics of confident ignorance, how it functions, why it is so difficult to correct, and how to ensure you are not trapped within it yourself. To understand this, we must first look at the core mechanism of perception. Schopenhauer observed that intelligence requires the ability to perceive complexity. But here is the catch. The perception of complexity requires prior knowledge. If you know nothing about a subject, it looks simple. And if it looks simple, you feel certain. This is what Schopenhauer called the fool's paradise. A state of blissful confidence created by complete ignorance of how much you do not know. Think of learning any new skill. When a beginner watches a master play chess or paint a canvas, it looks easy. The beginner thinks, I could do that. They only see the surface movements. They cannot see the calculation, the decades of practice, or the strategic depth. But the moment the beginner tries to play, they fail. Suddenly, the illusion shatters. They realize there is a massive gap between their ability and mastery. That realization of the gap is the beginning of true intelligence. It is the moment where confidence drops and doubt begins. But the confident idiot never takes that first step. They never try hard enough to fail. They remain at the surface, looking at the pool and assuming it is shallow. And because they cannot see the depth, they believe the depth does not exist. To them, the universe is simple, obvious, and easily understood. This creates what Schopenhauer warned as the illusion of comprehension. Familiarity is mistaken for expertise. We see this everywhere in the modern world. Someone reads a single headline about economics, and now they feel qualified to lecture on monetary policy. Someone watches a short documentary about history, and now they confidently explain the rise and fall of empires. Someone scrolls through quotes on social media, and now they believe they understand Marcus Aurelius. They have acquired terminology, not understanding. They know the words, but not the structure behind them. Familiarity is passive. You recognize the terms because you have heard them before. Expertise is active. It is the ability to work with those terms, to see their limitations, and to apply them to novel situations. But to the ignorant mind, recognition feels like mastery. They have heard the word stoicism, so they assume they understand it. Yet if you ask them how Stoics resolve the problem of external goods, or how their ethics differ from Epicureanism, they fall silent. They are familiar with the quotes, but blind to the philosophy. Schopenhauer experienced this constantly in academic circles. His colleagues would name-drop his ideas in conversations. They would use his terms, yet say things that proved they completely misunderstood the core premise of his work. They could repeat the words, but they could not digest the meaning. As Schopenhauer wrote, "The person who writes for fools is always sure of a large audience." Why? Because to a fool, a shallow assertion and a deep argument look exactly the same. They cannot tell the difference. So they choose the simple assertion because it is easier to hold. They mistake ease of understanding for truth. This leads to a more brutal realization. To recognize that someone is better than you at something, you must possess a baseline level of competence yourself. If you have zero knowledge of chess, you cannot appreciate the moves of a grandmaster. To you, it just looks like pieces sliding across a board. If you have no musical training, a virtuoso and a mediocre player sound roughly the same. They both sound good. This is the competence threshold for recognition. You need skill to recognize superior skill. Without that threshold, the expert and the amateur look identical to you. And when you cannot perceive excellence, you cannot aspire to it. You remain locked in your current state, believing your work is as good as the master's. It is not arrogance. It is a structural inability to see the gap. Schopenhauer observed this in his students. They would read a profound philosophical work and a cheap newspaper essay, and treat them as equally valid opinions. They lacked the training to see the rigorous logical framework of the former, and the shallow, unexamined assertions of the latter. To them, it was all just opinions. When you lack competence, the targets that experts hit are invisible to you. As Schopenhauer famously put it, talent hits a target no one else can hit, genius hits a target no one else can see. But we must add a third category. The idiot cannot see that there is a target at all. They think showing up to the field is the same as winning the match. Yet, incompetence does not always wear the mask of simple certainty. Sometimes it wears the mask of complex confusion. There are those who believe that if something is difficult to understand, it must be profound. They mistake complex language for deep thinking. Schopenhauer wrote extensively about this in his essay, On Style. He warned that writers and speakers who hide behind obscure language and heavy jargon are not deep thinkers. They are merely confused minds. They use complexity as a shield to hide their own lack of comprehension. It is the Dunning-Kruger effect dressed in academic or professional vocabulary. Because they do not understand the core principles, they cannot explain them simply. So they memorize buzzwords, double down on elaborate explanations, and confuse even themselves. Real understanding, Schopenhauer argued, always strives for clarity. If you cannot explain a concept simply, you do not own the idea. You are merely renting the words. This brings us to the most frustrating aspect of this phenomenon, the closed loop of ignorance. Evidence is often powerless against a mind that has already decided it is right. Because to accept new evidence, you must first have the framework to process it. Think of a common disagreement at work or in daily life. You show someone a faster, more efficient way to complete a task. You present clear data showing that their current method is slow and costly. But instead of changing their mind, they become defensive. They claim their situation is unique, or that The data doesn't capture the real reality. They do not reject your evidence because they are malicious. They reject it because admitting they were wrong would threaten their identity. Their ignorance acts as a shield, protecting their ego. When you argue with someone operating from this state, logic fails. Not because your argument is weak, but because they do not have the framework to receive it. As the saying goes, you cannot reason someone out of a position they did not reason themselves into. If their certainty is built on ignorance, more facts will not change them. It will only make them double down. Schopenhauer realized that some debates are structurally unwinnable, and attempting to win them is merely outsourcing your own peace of mind. So how do we escape this trap? If every idiot believes they are intelligent, how do we know we are not the idiots? The answer lies in one word: doubt. Not a paralyzing doubt that stops you from acting, but a productive doubt that keeps you curious. The intelligent person lives with a quiet discomfort. They ask themselves, what if I am wrong? What am I missing? Who knows more about this than I do? They treat their beliefs as working models of the world, not absolute truths. They actively look for evidence that contradicts their positions. They do not fear being wrong, because being wrong means they have learned something new. They value truth over the ego's need for certainty. The fool's paradise is comfortable. Certainty is warm, safe, and simple. But it is a prison. True intelligence is a deep, quiet river. It knows that the surface is only a fraction of the water. It welcomes the complexity. It accepts the doubt. If you find yourself arguing with a confident idiot, stop. Recognize the structural blindness. Do not try to force a fax into a room with no machine. Instead, turn your focus inward. Test your own certainties. Ask yourself if you are holding a belief merely because it feels simple. Choose curiosity over certainty. Choose the quiet depth of the river over the noise of the shallow creek. Because, as Schopenhauer knew, the wisest mind is the one that knows how much it does not know. And the most dangerous prison is the one you believe is a palace. Be sovereign. Be still.